Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm excited to get started talking about process. I love process as we move forward. But before I get started, I just want to give a tip for those of you showing up early and on time. You would think this is my first time talking. Uh, but here's an AI tip, right? And it kind of goes a little bit into the process, and so maybe it relates to what training is happening today. But my tip for you is just how you're using AI and ways to think about using AI that's out there. Because I think if you're like me, you hear a lot of noise. Not that noise is a bad thing, but you hear a lot of noise about AI and blah, 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 right? All these things. But how can AI impact your business or your particular work? And an example of what I was doing yesterday that's going to save me a ton of time is I do these lives. And when I'm done on YouTube, I actually have to download it, trim the video, upload it, and then put a description back in there so that it's ready for replays and people can watch it. And so I used AI to build a quick little process that now, after I do my lives, generally in the afternoon, the AI tool, they call them an agent, right? The agent will go out, check YouTube and go, has Neil done a live recently that we haven't touched? And it'll download it, trim it, upload it, put the description in for me and be all done. Instantly eliminating that out. It helps me reach the audience that I want to reach and expand the people I'm helping with my training. All of it, though, eliminating what I'm doing. These are called AI agents, and not to, for me to be some sort of AI agent expert, but it's a quick little tip for you that when you think about using AI, don't think about replacing your business or, your whatever you're doing. I'm looking at Laura, for example, in here. Don't look at everything you do and go, how can I use AI to replace it all? Take one thing and go, how can I replace this one thing? Now another thing and another thing. And you eventually, the idea is you might have 50 or 100 different of these little agents that are doing one little task each that help you move forward. For me, that's awesome because it enables me to push away the work that is busy work and focus my energy on what I'm about to get into, which is training, right? To focus on giving you value there. So hopefully you found that helpful. It's a quick tip for those of you showing up early and on time. I really appreciate when you do. It helps LinkedIn let other people know that we've got started. If you haven't done this already, definitely put your city and state. Let me know where you're coming from. More importantly, let everybody else know where you're coming from. When you describe your business, put 2 or 3 words in there. If you're from the federal buyer side in particular, not that you're better than any of our other attendees, right? But we really appreciate that you come in here. I've been noticing more and more people in here. It used to be David Waltz from the Navy. He's been in here, I think, a couple of years now, realizing that he can engage with the very small business sellers that he's looking for. But there's other people in here. And so I like that. Let us know who you are. We very much appreciate that you're engaging with us. All right, let's get rocking and rolling on today's training around government contracting success in 7 repeatable steps. And spoiler alert, this is training around what I have just perfected in the last 8 years since I sold my last government contracting business, but really perfecting the process down into something that's measurable for you to be able to move forward. So that's what we're going to be talking about. One of the concerns I have is that most small businesses, and frankly mine too, I was really good at sales, but I wasn't really following any particular process. And so most small businesses, we chase opportunities that are out there in the federal market with no process. And it shows in the way that we just kind of wing everything we're doing. We wing our conversations with federal buyers, whether it's program office or contracting officer, or even the small business specialist. We wing that. We don't use a call plan like I teach that goes in focus. We wing it on how we do capture, trying to pursue an opportunity, and how we write responses, and even where we're going. Right, we don't have a process on the agencies we're targeting or the type of work we're targeting, and process begins to help us pull that in. I put in here 2 rabbits, and there's this line out there that says, if you chase 2 rabbits, you're not going to eat dinner tonight. And the idea is if you let yourself be distracted. Another great phrase is out there that a lot of us use. It was just squirrel. You're moving around, and not that we're dogs, but like a dog, you see a squirrel and you chase it. And all of a sudden, your entire plan for the day has gone towards the squirrel. And when you don't have a process, you're susceptible to seeing a squirrel and chasing a squirrel. We also call it a shiny object syndrome, right? But those are obvious kind of flaws in our process. But there's another less obvious flaw in what we do sometimes, and it's constructive procrastination, where we're working on something that might seem good, but we're not working on exactly what we're supposed to. I'll give you a really quick example. I just said I was doing that YouTube AI tool I built yesterday. That's cool and all, but that actually wasn't my number one priority. And so I can rationalize that it saved me time, it's efficient, etc. Yeah, but there's something else I was supposed to do. And for you, right, it's chasing opportunities. And so you want to turn that chaos that happens when you don't follow a process into consistency that wins. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. If that's what you're here for today, then put process rocks in the chat. If you haven't saw that already and got to it, put process rocks in the chat. Understanding that process is what's going to lead you to whatever success you want. Frankly, whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side, you still need to follow process. My process for today's training, the way I'm going to break up today's training is into three main sections. First, I want to talk about the value and help you understand the value of process, a little bit of the evolution of a process. The second thing I want to talk about is the 5 stages of process maturity. This is a huge one that I love because it helps me realize, well, it's one thing to put process in place. It's another to be mature, your process to mature. It's also sometimes called organizational maturity. And then the third thing we're going to talk about, which I really am driving towards today's topic, that's 7 steps. My 7-step process for federal revenue success. Simplifying the complexity that sometimes falls into our world by just having 7 simple steps that we can follow. So that's what we're going to jump onto today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I'm founder of CallPlan AI, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market after I got out of the Army as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. This is what I want for you. I want you to have predictable success going into 2026. If you haven't done so already, make sure you come out of YouTube and other places that you're at and follow me on LinkedIn. When you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll be notified of content I put out. Like yesterday, I put out something that turned out to be really valuable on U.S. Space Force to industry. And this morning, I put out some more content as well that can be helpful if you're trying to pursue DoD and DISA, Defense Information Services Agency or something. So sometimes I don't remember every single acronym. But anyways, join the 41,000 other people who are following me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my GovCon Success newsletter. Tomorrow's training, if you haven't registered already, make sure you register for it. It's Daily Federal Sales Habits for Success. This is a good one for me. If I'm talking about process today, it's holistic around your company. But what do we do as business developers? And if our company, if our job title is CEO, we're still a business developer, right? Business developer is a loose term in the government for basically sales. So if we're doing business development, capture, we're doing sales, I want to give you I want to give you specific daily habits you can do, and really at the beginning of the day, so that you make sure every day is productive. So go ahead and register for that. All right, let's get diving into the beginning part of this, understanding the value of process. And I tried to figure out, because I got a lot of content to share with you, how I could communicate the evolution of process, if you will. When you think about, I talk all the time, government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. Well, what is the process? What is process, right? And I just backed it up into this one way of looking at it. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm a process engineer, which is a whole skill set. But basically, you start with knowledge. You need to understand what's going on. Today, I'm going to talk about the 7-step process, and I'm giving you knowledge in here. I'm talking to you about the what do you need to do, right? What are those steps? What are you trying to get done? If I say business development as an example, the what of it is to understand an agency, to build relationships, and to identify opportunities. Things like that is the knowledge, and then the how. And the thing about knowledge is the what and the how are conceptual. I'm sharing it with you, but you still haven't developed a skill. You're like, oh, I know what that is. I can rattle it off. I can talk about it, but have you begun to put it in place? And that's when you take knowledge and turn it into skill. Skill is the application or execution of the knowledge you just learned. And it could be anything, right? If I tell you how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I've given you the knowledge. There's peanut butter and there's jelly, there's bread, there's a knife, there's a spoon, right? And a paper towel. Don't make the sandwich on the counter. It's crazy. Anyway, so I give you conceptually the process to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then you begin to practice it. You put the peanut butter on one side, and then you put the jelly on top of that, and then you put the bread, just because I want to be controversial there. right? And so that's the execution of the knowledge you gained on something. And in government contracting, in our jobs, it's the same thing. And then the practice of making that repeatable and developing that skill is process, right? This is where you're adapting to what you're learning and you're doing process improvement. So that's the adaptive part of it. And then you're making it predictable. You're turning that skill into a predictable result. It's one thing to have the skill. There's this great line that says, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And it's the same kind of thing when you're developing a skill. You got to make sure you've got that knowledge on how to develop the skill or how the skill is operated, and then practice that over and over again. Anyway, so loosely, that's the idea of process. And the reason you want process, 3 simple reasons I picked on why process is valuable, is that you get predictable results. This is the biggest thing, right? If you make my peanut butter and jelly sandwich the way I asked, I'm going to have a great lunch. I'm going to have a great sandwich, predictable results. It puts you in control. When you have a process you're following, the rest of us kind of just latch onto you and we're like, oh, here's the process for success. Let me follow that. It's literally what I teach when I talk about call plans in a meeting. When you have a call plan, you've got a process for the meeting success. And when you let the other person know, hey, I've got this call plan, I'd like to follow along if that's okay with you. Sure, go ahead. And now they are joining you to follow that plan. You are in control. You're still looking for win-win for both of you, but somebody is in control, and you following process puts you in that control. And then the last thing is it gives you all sorts of efficiency and productivity bumps. And through those, you're reducing the costs out there. I talked about using an AI tool to implement my YouTube video scrubbing or something, right? Well, that's using AI to get there. But before I even used AI to do this activity, I was doing this manually, and I kept maturing the process. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so there's 5 stages of process maturity, and there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but I just wanted to make sure I introduced it to you or refreshed your memory on it, because it's really important. When you understand the journey, then you can decide, where am I on that journey? So if you think about your processes for whatever your job is, you can begin to ask yourself, even my simple descriptions here, where is my process? Where am I with my process in this maturity level journey? And so the first thing, when we're just developing those skills into process and following the process, it's ad hoc and unpredictable. The results sometimes are hit or miss, and so we call it chaotic. The other thing is often it's dependent on a hero or heroics, right? We call it a firefighter. You need this firefighter to come in to save the day and put the building fire out. This was a weakness I had in my last company as a government contractor. I was very good at sales, but my process was like heroic. I would go in, I could wow the customer, I could land something, but I could never share that right to some of my staff, and I could never help them get to the next level. Now I can, because I spent the last 8 years really refining and understanding and documenting the process. But in the beginning, even as good as I was still basically in that initial stage, because it was a little bit chaotic. The growth from there, the maturity goes into repeatable, right? So once I have that process, forget about anybody else. Can I repeat the process the same way over and over again? An example is I do these live trainings and I build slide decks. I don't think I'm at the next level yet, but I'm at repeatable, because I come in very quick. I got a title slide. I've got an agenda slide. I've got 3 slides generally that I like. I got a sponsor slide and I got a closing slide. So I've got a repeatable process for delivering these trainings. And so it's established, but it's not standardized across the organization. That's when you move into defined, where you're documenting that process. We're saying, this is our process and we're following it. It's standardized across the organization. So not just me is following it, but everybody in the company is following this process. This is a normal thing in the government. An example is in a hospital in the VA, if there's some liquid on the ground, everybody in that hospital has been trained and knows the exact same process for what to do when you see a spill in a hallway somewhere, right? You stop and you do something. Well, that's documented and standardized across every single person in that organization. You want that same thing in your sales activities. The 4th stage of the process maturity levels is managed. And so once you got it documented, we're saying it's out there, well, we're all agreeing that we're following to the process. Managed is when we start monitoring it and controlling it. We track it with KPIs, et cetera. So if I've got several different people and I'm saying, that we're going to do so many phone calls to reach federal buyers or something. Well, we've got a number. We say we call 25 a day. We have 5 meetings a week. We write, we find this many opportunities, et cetera. Your sales pipeline is basically managed opportunity development, where you can look in there and go, do we have the right amount of opportunities? Are they at the certain amount that we want them to? Are they growing in the right direction, like towards a sale that we want? This is managed, right, where it's monitored and controlled through those KPIs. And then the last evolution of the process maturity is optimized. And this is where you're just looking at it and constantly doing process improvement. Some people do it on a regular basis, like monthly or quarterly, but it's sufficient if you've got a really good monitored or managed process that you're doing annually. Everybody looks at it. And this is, again, something the government does really well, is to look across their processes in their organization, whether it's in the small business office or whether it's in the special operations rangers, like when I was in the Army, right? All of us had those processes. We would look at them and go, are they still working for us? All right, so those are the 5 stages of process maturity. Hopefully that makes sense there. Put 5 stages if that made sense. Hey, before we move on to the 7 steps, and I want to walk through the 7 steps for success, do me a favor and thank our sponsors. We have Voltron, who is sponsoring our lives through the year, which is exciting, and I'm very excited to be working with them. Voltron is an AI proposal writing firm, and they help you write more winning federal proposals with their AI tools, and they're really driven on the federal side of the business. What I like is how they help you go quickly from solicitation when you find an opportunity that you like, whether it's in something like GovWin or in market research, and then to be able to write a compelling and compliant draft that you can start doing something with and having a very good response ready. And they do that in minutes, not weeks. And so it's really exciting to have them as a sponsor. Thank Voltron for me. Just a quick thanks, Voltron, in there would be perfect. Okay, so let's talk about my 7-step process for federal revenue success. This process has evolved in the last 8 years. Actually, let me minimize myself and make this slide a little bigger. This process has been me defining it over years. I've been part of the old school thing where there was this Shipley process, and it was really convoluted. Way too many process steps in their sub-processes. And the thing about Shipley is, yes, it's good, but it was built for a much, much larger organization. Like I say, it's $1 billion process being shoved down into smalls. And they admit it because they tweak it around. Not to knock them. What I'm trying to say is the process for small businesses doing, let's say, 20 million or less is so simple. And this process, by the way, is the same process a $1 billion firm could follow. It's very simple to understand. The execution takes a little bit more skill, knowledge and skill. But I want to walk you through in the next few minutes what the 7-step processes are as you go forward. So let's take the Navy just for the fun of it. If you're trying to get into the Navy, step 1 is research. You want to understand the Navy better than anybody in the Navy. And think about this. If your target is the Navy and you're saying to yourself, I want to build a $10 million firm in the Navy, then you're not distracted by Department of Education or the Air Force or DHS, other things. You're looking at the Navy. So you start with the overall Navy organization. You're understanding how is the Navy structured. They have these 10 buying commands. They're organized in these echelon levels. Whatever it is, you begin to understand the Navy, and you begin to understand the Navy as it relates to what you sell. Well, a lot of the Navy is not going to want to talk to you about what they sell because they don't buy. They don't buy what you sell, right? And so it's important to do that research to understand them. As you do the research, you're going to start finding those program offices and those contracting offices that do have something to do with what you sell. It's a really important part of the research is to understand the organization of the agency or the customer you're trying to get into. Another part of the research is you can begin to understand who's winning in there, what large primes are winning in there, what small businesses are winning in there. You can look at the size of the contracts. You can begin to understand what contract vehicles are used in there. So this is research. You're looking in there. Step 2, when you begin to get a good understanding, is you want to build a target list. I want to get into the Navy. I'm going to build a target list of 1 to 200 people so that I can go in and start trying to do outreach meetings. I'm going to start sending them emails, things like that. Well, I need at least 100 or 200 names because so many of them won't even see the email. Others will just not respond. Others will say no. And so you need a big enough pool of leads to be able to reach out. And I call this targeting, a target list. And so if you make that list 200 people, you're going to find people who will talk to you. if you're trying to get into a particular part of the Navy, and let's say PEO Digital, well, PEO Digital has, I don't know, 400 or 500 people. So you would be pulling people out of PEO Digital to put into your target list that are government folks, government program office personnel, contract office personnel, and you would try to find the small business professionals that are within the Navy, and especially within PEO Digital. And so as you build that targeting list, though, you also want to find, let's say, 40 or 50 small business winners and maybe 20 large business winners. You want to find as many people as you can from different angles, because when you're trying to get inside an agency, the process is to try to come in through as many doors as you can. So you continue learning and you begin to find people who will make introductions to you, or maybe on the industry side, team up with you, et cetera. So you build your targeting list of all those different stakeholders. From those stakeholder groups, you start doing outreach. And your first goal is to just reach out to get that initial meeting, right? Whatever kind of meeting it is. I call it an intro meeting or intro call. Do you have 15, 30 minutes so that I can reach out and introduce myself? I've done all sorts of trainings, like 50 plus trainings on how you can reach out to a federal buyer or industry partners to try to get that first meeting. You want to be strategic about it so you increase the number of yeses. But outreach is about trying to get that relationship started. In step 4, you'll see me talk about relationships in a second, but outreach includes the first, the second, the third meeting until you've established that relationship, until you feel like it's happened. It doesn't happen on the first meeting, always. Sometimes it does, right? Sometimes you connect with somebody and it's like, oh yeah, it's a good fit. Let's keep talking. How about we follow up? Absolutely. And maybe they're thinking the same way as you are, right? That they're trying to build some good relationships. You've just started the process. And so outreach is where you're sending emails and then you're following up with a voicemail. I have all sorts of training where I talk about how often should you follow up with somebody. And I'm like, follow up over a period of 30 days, just every 2 or 3 days is totally fine. If they don't get back to you, don't sit there and read anything into it because you have no idea why they're not getting back to you. Let them say no. You're not, as long as you're professional, you're not annoying them. Step 3 is outreach, and that's trying to get those meetings and get in and talk to those people so that you can move into step 4, which are relationships. If you look at the diagram that I have here, the process diagram, you see that research, targeting, and outreach are the 3 process steps to building a relationship. And the reason I say that is so important is because when you look at the circle, the wheel of success, relationships are the start of the wheel of success. Once you're in that circle, you're not going to come off. You're just going to keep going around. You'll do good work and you'll build stronger relationships, new relationships, et cetera. And so we want that path of relationships to get us in. Early on, 1, 2, and 3 will be doing a big lift, but then it'll start shrinking a little bit because you've got great relationships that you learn much faster. You get introductions much faster, et cetera. So step 4 is relationships, but the term you want to pay attention is strategic relationships. These are not just people you know, but these are people who are committed to mutual success, mutual growth. And you can have that with a buyer, and you can have that with potential teammates out there. With a buyer, they just want to learn. They want to learn what you know. You're the expert. They want to figure out how they can weave it into their goals, their pain points, understanding their own requirements, right? And that's what you're doing inside of the relationship. But the main reason for the relationship is to identify opportunities. When you have a relationship within industry partners or with federal buyers, then you're going to be able to hear about opportunities. And especially, you'll hear about them a lot sooner, right? There's nothing wrong with the government telling you about a potential RFI long before it ever comes out. I've done a ton of training where I talk about you want to shift left in the sales cycle or the acquisition life cycle all the way down to the idea. When somebody's like, I got an idea. I'll give you a quick example. If I could get a meeting with somebody and I'm in their office, and in the IT world in particular, often on the back wall, I will see a 10-year plan. And I can pick their brain on some of that, right? Some people will talk about it, some won't. But the idea is when you're in there and you have these relationships, you can hear about the opportunities. When you're talking with teaming partners, they got contract vehicles you don't have. And so you'll hear about opportunities through them on that vehicle and you can team up. A lot of value in there, but the biggest path to opportunities and hearing about the right opportunities for your pipeline is through these relationships you will develop. One other thing about the opportunities is they need to be slam dunk opportunities. And slam dunk means that these were written for you. Anybody in your company looks at that requirement document and goes, oh my God, that was written for us, right? I say if you have to rationalize or anybody has to rationalize why it's a good opportunity for you, it's not a slam dunk. It doesn't mean you don't pursue it automatically. Generally, you should not. but it's not an automatic dead, but it's a difference between an automatic yes. And you want to identify through your relationships those slam dunk opportunities that fit for your company. And you just know if you send a response, you're going to have a 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 chance of winning. So when you have the right opportunities, step 5, these slam dunk opportunities, and you have enough of them, you're going to be able to write winning proposals. These are proposals that are not just spewed out with AI's help to be able to do as much as possible, but the AI and you and your capture activity, your discussions with the customers, all of that comes together to write what I call a winning proposal. A proposal that if the KO and the program office had it in front of them, they're like, oh my God, I want to award to this company. Now, your one challenge is there might be other winning proposals, but that's okay. You want to at least make sure your proposal is one that they seriously are considering. And you do that by having the right opportunities in your pipeline and then doing capture around those opportunities so that you can write winning proposals. When you write winning proposals and a sufficient amount of winning proposals, you're going to have sales success. If you're brand new to the game, or scratch that. One of the things you have to keep in mind is don't just write prime contract proposals. Be on a team, be a subcontractor to somebody else so you can write more proposals. It doesn't matter whether you're priming or subbing, you're still writing proposals. That will increase your chances of sales, which leads directly to revenue, right? One last thing about this before I move on is I went forward in the process. What I would encourage you to do is to go backwards in the process. Take a minute, get a couple of people in your company who are tracking on the sales and revenue success in your company and say, hey, let's look at this and go, do we have enough revenue and sales? If no, let's back up through the process. We call this reverse engineering. Let's go backwards through the process from sales to proposals to opportunities. Do we have enough opportunities? Do we have enough relationships? Back up and ask yourself that, and you will be able to find where your bottleneck is that's preventing you from having the revenue success that you're looking for. Here's what I want you to remember from today's training. First off, remember that everything we're talking about, it goes from knowledge to skill to process. Knowledge is the what and the how, but it's really conceptual. You need to turn that into a skill, and then once you've developed it into a solid skill, you'll be developing it into a process, and that process is what's going to make you have repeatable, predictable results. If you want that 7-step process, if you didn't take a screenshot already, just put 7-step process in the chat, and I will get it to you. I'm a little behind because yesterday I had 182 comments and I'm still trying to go through them all in the training, but I print that out, have it up on your wall. So you look at that and go, am I following the process today? What am I doing? Am I building relationships? Am I doing research? Know where you're at on the process. And then the last thing is evaluate your company. Do that reverse engineering on the 7-step process, and you will find the bottleneck that is preventing you from hitting the success levels that you want. As you move forward, if you're looking for help on increasing federal sales, my new company, CallPlan AI, is a SaaS company. I'm building out how to get in there and have those relationships through CallPlan and through AI. That's the reason I got it together. But anyways, it's a brand new company, and I'm developing it together with our subscribers. If you're interested in coming over, being part of that journey with me, I'll give you 90% off for life. I'm really excited about this because I believe relationships are the strongest measure for success in your company. All right, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is ending on time. I'm 2 whole minutes early. I don't know what to do with myself. I will see you in the next training.